Yo, 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 YouTube, what is up? BK here. Welcome to the BK Lounge. It is Monday, December 16th, 2019. Hopefully everyone's having a good Monday. Hopefully everybody had a good weekend. Hopefully you had a better weekend than I did. I spent 24 hours on a Greyhound bus going to and from El Paso from Austin over the weekend. Lost a bet on the show, Midday with Trey and BK on the Horn. Had to pay that one off this weekend. It was rough. But that's not what this video is going to be about. As you could probably tell by the title, we're talking coordinators at the University of Texas. Major coordinator news breaking over the last 24 hours or so on both the offensive and defensive side of the football. It appears the Longhorns have their defensive coordinator figured out. Nothing official yet from the University of Texas, but multiple folks reporting yesterday and really all weekend long that it is going to be Chris Ash as the next defensive coordinator for UT. But the breaking news that dropped a little more than an hour ago, maybe 2 hours at this point, according to USC, they actually tweeted this out. They broke the news themselves. Offensive coordinator Graham Harrell, who was one of, if not the top target for Texas to replace Tim Beck as the offensive coordinator here in Austin. Graham Harrell, the USC offensive coordinator, is going to stay at USC, signing a new 3-year contract extension that'll pay him $1.2 million per year. So that takes Graham Harrell out of the running, out of consideration for the offensive coordinator job at Texas. And that's a big-time bummer for fans of this Longhorn football program because he was the top target. And really since, 2 Sundays ago, 2 weeks ago from yesterday, that's when Tim Beck was demoted. You heard Graham Harrell's name from the jump. I mean, it was him and Joe Brady as the initial top targets for the Longhorns. Most people, I think most rational folks realize that LSU's not going to let Joe Brady go, right? They're going to do whatever they can to keep him in Baton Rouge because the Tigers have had such a historic offensive year. They weren't going to let Joe Brady walk, right? They could pay like Texas can pay, and that always felt like a pipe dream. But the other top target was Graham Harrell, and that felt feasible for the Longhorns, right? Graham Harrell, a guy who's from the state of Texas, obviously played his college ball at Texas Tech, a guy who's coached in the state of Texas before USC. He was at UNT up in Denton. Graham Harrell's family still lives in Texas. His dad's a high school coach in the state of Texas up in the Metroplex. And you combine all of those things with the fact that USC is where it's at right now. And that is a program in dysfunction. I know there's a lot going on around the University of Texas, so this might be a pot calling the kettle black type of situation, but as bad as things are around these parts, they're nowhere close to as bad as what's happening at USC. We weren't sure whether or not Clay Helton was going to be brought back as the head coach. He's going to get another year. I think most of the fans of Southern Cal are not happy about that at all, but and you figured because of the uncertainty there, right? Clay Helton, I don't know how much support he has with the university. They've got a new AD out there. I don't know what the boosters think of him. I don't know what the fans think of him. You figured maybe Graham Harrell would want to try to leave that situation, right? I mean, not that Texas is a whole hell of a lot better, and not that Tom Herman's seat isn't warm, but it's not what's going on at USC, and it's not like Clay Helton's seat, at least I don't think. So you figured maybe, okay, Graham Harrell would listen. He'd consider taking the University of Texas job because of all of those factors, and that's not the case. That's not the case. You knew USC was going to pony up to try to keep Graham Harrell. They had great offensive numbers this year, and they needed something. Clay Helton needed something to get his fan base motivated for the fact that he's going to be their head coach next year. Folks there at USC liked Graham Harrell. They liked the job that he did this year. Had to deal with 3 quarterbacks, but turned Keaton Slovis, a freshman, into a really, really talented player. And the future seems bright for USC, at least on that side of the football. They needed to keep Graham Harrell. You knew they were going to do whatever they could to keep Graham Harrell around to try to create some positive momentum and keep fans coming to the games at the Coliseum next year. But, I still thought Texas had a chance. And over the last couple of weeks, once again, the reports are that Graham Harrell was a top target for Texas. And the Longhorns can pay up. They can outbid just about anybody in the country. And it felt like Texas had a really, really good shot to land Graham Harrell until the last 24 or 48 hours or so when there started to become some rumblings that maybe it's not going to be Graham Harrell. Now, I don't know this for sure. I'm going to dig on this, but something we talked about on the show today and something that has surfaced on various insider sites and all over social media, there was a recent belief that maybe Tom Herman could be pulling the plug on the whole Graham Harrell situation, on the potential of Graham Harrell being the offensive coordinator here, right? I don't know that for sure if that's exactly what went down, but there was recent scuttle that Tom Herman was maybe struggling with the fact that he would have to give up total control of his offense and give it to Graham Harrell. I mean, Tom Herman is a power spread type of guy. That's his offensive philosophy. Graham Harrell's an air raid guy. Different ends of the spectrum, different philosophies, and there were reports that maybe Tom Herman was not cool just giving it to an air raid guy, letting an air raid guy come in, control the offense, call the plays. It's just not the type of offense that Tom Herman wants to run. And there were reports of that, once again, coming over the last couple of days, that might be a reason why Graham Harrell wouldn't get the job at Texas. Like, it felt like, and reports for the last week and a half, up to 2 weeks, felt like this was a Graham Harrell decision, right? If Graham Harrell wants to take the job at UT, the job is his, and that's kind of what everybody assumed was the case. But once again, more recently, maybe some nervousness, maybe some cold feet by Tom Herman about handing over the keys to this offense to somebody who shares a different philosophy than he does. Now, that's relatively concerning, and we'll get to that in a second. But we do know now, once again, that Graham Harrell is not going to be the offensive coordinator at Texas. So who's out there? What's next? Who does Tom Herman look to try to run this offense? Now that Joe Brady's gone, now that Graham Harrell is gone, you've seen a lot of other potential names. Jeff Scott at Clemson, he's gone. He took the South Florida head coaching job. You've seen a lot of dominoes fall here in the coaching carousel this offseason, and it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of big names that are out there. But I'm going to give you one. I'm going to give you a couple of names, but there's one guy who I think should be considered the favorite right now. Now, I did say that about Graham Harrell last time I was on this channel, so maybe take it with a grain of salt. But from talking to some folks, things that I'm hearing, and just trying to piece some things together myself, trying to connect some dots, the guy that I think is the favorite, or should be considered the favorite to be the next offensive coordinator at Texas, is Chip Long, who was fired as the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame a couple of days ago. He was there for 3 years under Brian Kelly. He was the guy who came in to fix the offense after the 4-8 year in 2016, in which Notre Dame lost that game to Texas in double overtime, and Texas is back, folks, and that whole deal started. Brian Kelly cleaned house after that year, and the guy he brought in to be the offensive coordinator was Chip Long. And Notre Dame's had some success. I mean, they're 32-6 over the last 3 years. And of course, last year they were undefeated and made it to the college football playoff before losing to Clemson. They've won 10 games in each of the 3 years that Chip Long was calling the plays and running the offense in South Bend. You got to see Ian Book kind of come out of nowhere, take over the quarterback job with the Fighting Irish last year, and he's been pretty solid, a pretty good player since he took over at quarterback. And Notre Dame had some decent success on offense. Matter of fact, this year, they were 13th in the country in scoring offense, averaging 37 points per game. Like, the numbers for Notre Dame's offense under Chip Long were pretty damn good. Like, eye-popping. Like, why would you get rid of this guy? Because your offense is seemingly doing all right and your team is being successful. If you're Brian Kelly, why would you make the move? I've been doing some reading over the last couple of days, and it just felt like there was a disconnect. Speaking of differing philosophies, it kind of felt like there was a little bit of headbutting going on between Brian Kelly, the head coach, and Chip Long as the offensive coordinator about what Notre Dame wanted to be on offense. If you dig a little bit deeper, I will mention these. Notre Dame's stats offensively were good this year, as I mentioned, scoring offense especially, but they struggled against good teams this year, and that was kind of a theme over the 3-year run with Chip Long as the offensive coordinator, right? I mean, this year against Georgia and against Michigan, the 2 losses for Notre Dame, they scored a combined 31 points, which isn't great. So maybe that was a little bit of a knock on Chip Long, but just based off what I've read over the last couple of days, and there's guys out there who know more about Notre Dame football than I do, but it just felt like there was a little bit of butting heads, a little bit of a riff between Brian Kelly and Chip Long. And Brian Kelly was asked about the decision to get rid of Chip Long, and he said it was basically his decision. Right? He was asked if the players had any impact on it, and Brian Kelly said, "No, I didn't interview the players, but you're not going to be a head coach for very long if you don't have a pulse of the locker room." So Brian Kelly sort of hinted at maybe some of the players within the locker room at Notre Dame were not happy with the offense, and we're not happy with the play calling, and we're not happy with Chip Long. I know there were some Fighting Irish fans who were clamoring for a quarterback change midway through the year. Chip Long always said Ian Book was his guy. He stuck with Ian Book. Maybe there was a little bit of a riff, an internal riff within the players about that decision. I'm not entirely sure, but Brian Kelly kind of hinted that maybe some of the players were not real thrilled with Chip Long running the offense in South Bend, trying to piece together and figure out exactly why he got let go at Notre Dame. But that's not our problem. I think he should be looked at as one of the top candidates for the Texas offensive coordinator job. And Chip Long's offense is very RPO heavy. Very RPO heavy. He's an RPO wizard, if you will. And I think that's what Tom Herman wants to do with this offense. I think that's what he wants to do with Sam Ehlinger for next year. And I think that philosophy fits more into the power spread that Tom Herman runs than what Graham Harrell would have brought to the table as the air raid guy, a guy who likes to throw the ball more than 50, even around 60+% of the time. Tom Herman's not like that. We've known that from day one. When Texas hired Tom Herman, we knew he's a guy who loves to play smash mouth football, loves to run the football. Hell, he wouldn't throw the football at all if he didn't have to. The air raid philosophy just didn't seem like an ideal fit. Now, I thought and I was expecting Tom Herman to just be willing to give Graham Harrell control of the offense because Tom Herman realizes his seat is warming up in Austin, and I thought maybe he'd realize that the offense that he brought to the table this year did not work, and maybe this program could have used a change, a completely different scheme, a completely different philosophy to maybe turn some things around. I thought that's the way that Tom Herman was leaning, but I'm not sure it was. I'm really not sure that it was, and whether it was Graham Harrell's decision to not come here or if it was Tom Herman's decision to pull the plug on this whole ordeal, it's better to do this right now than midway through the season. And let me explain that. Graham Harrell would have been a big name. I would have been excited about the hire. There's no doubt about that. I would have loved to see what this air raid offense would have looked like. The team that keeps winning this conference every year, Oklahoma, they run an air raid offense, and it's really, really hard to stop. So I would have loved to see what would have happened with the talent that Texas gets year after year, how that would thrive in the air raid system. That would have been great. But if Tom Herman was not fully bought in to going to an air raid style offense, that could have been a problem. What would have happened if midway through the summer or during fall camp next year or during the season the offense struggles a little bit and Tom Herman's like, man, to hell with the air raid. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Give me back my offense. I'm the head coach here. This is my baby. Let me run this deal. There could have been some serious, I keep using this phrase, I'm sorry, serious butting of heads between Tom Herman and Graham Harrell because of how different they view offenses. And that would have been a problem, right? If that had happened at some point after Graham Harrell was hired. Once again, I would have been okay with Tom Herman giving up the reins, giving up the power of the offense, letting Graham Harrell do his thing. I think that was needed. I think external voices are needed here at UT. But it's better to, if there was a chance, even a little bit of a chance of that happening, it's better to not even bring Graham Harrell in, not even try it and hope for the best. So Graham Harrell is out. And that's why Chip Long, I think, should be viewed as a candidate for this job. He's pretty young. I think he's 36 years old, 36, 38, still in his 30s, still viewed pretty highly in the coaching realm, despite getting relieved of his duties at Notre Dame earlier this week. I mean, Chip Long was a Broyles Award finalist last year. He's one of the top assistants in college football. Only 5 guys are Broyles Awards finalists. Joe Brady won that award this year, funny enough. And Chip Long was a finalist last year. So I think there's high regard for this dude. I don't know if he's the big name that Graham Harrell or Joe Brady is. I'm not sure if he's going to move the needle as much as either of those guys would have. But I think of all the guys that are out there, I think he's the biggest name left. And I think he's got the most skins on the wall. And he's the guy who would excite me the most as a Texas fan. The live chat is rocking and rolling. I appreciate that, guys. I haven't checked that today. I'll read some of your questions here in a second. I do want to mention a couple of other names that could be in the mix for the offensive coordinator job if it's not Chip Long, if I'm completely wrong on this whole deal. A couple of other guys to look out for. Maybe Rhett Lashley, who is the offensive coordinator at SMU. Now, he runs not a total air raid like Graham Harrell does, but he's got a lot of air raid principles to his offense. SMU put up historically good offensive numbers this year. Shane Buechele, of course, the quarterback up there. They had great success on that side of the football. He's a name to maybe look out for. And then Courtney Messingham is a name that I've heard once or twice. He is the offensive coordinator at Kansas State. Of course, has only been there for 1 year since K-State flipped coaching staffs going into this season. That's another name that's out there, and a guy who shares more of a similar offensive philosophy to Tom Herman than any of the air raid guys out there. So that name doesn't move the needle at all. I'm not sure Rhett Lashley moves the needle at all for Texas Longhorn fans. I'm sure there's some Longhorn fans who are so ticked that it's not Joe Brady or Graham Harrell that they're not going to be satisfied at all, regardless of who the new offensive coordinator is going to be. But man, time will tell with all of these hires. Time will tell, and Tom Herman's smart enough to realize that these hires, these decisions he makes this offseason are going to dictate whether or not he is the guy at the University of Texas. The moves that he makes, we've talked about this for months, even going back to the regular season. The moves that Tom Herman makes to his coaching staff in the offseason, this offseason, are going to determine his legacy on the 40 acres. His seat is getting warmer. There's no doubt about that. And if things don't change relatively quickly here in Austin, then there might only be one more year of Tom Herman here in the 512. So, all right, let's check the chat. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate you guys giving your feedback. Longhorn 1016 says, who is the head coach at Texas next year? Tom Herman. Maybe mean 2021. I still have faith in Tom Herman being the right guy. Perhaps a little bit discouraged by the way these coaching staff searches are going. More specifically, the defensive coordinator search, which we'll get to in a second. But I've said it from day one that I think Tom Herman's the guy. Now, did this year suck? Of course it did. And does Tom Herman have to win me over like he has to win a lot of Longhorn fans over? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this year was unacceptable. But I still think, and I'll eat my words if I'm wrong, but I still think Tom Herman is the guy to turn things around and get this program back on track. And if I had to guess, I would say that he will be the head coach beyond this year at UT. Now, if the Longhorns go 7-5 again and finish 3 games back of even making it to the Big 12 championship game, then I'm not sure. Then Tom Herman probably shouldn't be the coach in 2021, but I don't think that's going to happen next year. I think this team will be better than 7-5. Justin says, is Graham Harrell now the coach in waiting at USC? Yeah, that's another great point. I brought that up on the radio show last week. Perhaps another intriguing factor for Graham Harrell to stay at USC, which they announced earlier that he will be. He signed an extension to stay as the offensive coordinator at SC. Perhaps another intriguing factor for Graham Harrell to stay in Southern California is the fact that Clay Helton's seat is so hot. Like, that could work both ways, but maybe Graham Harrell is thinking, well, if USC as a team sucks next year and Clay Helton sucks next year and this team's 8-4, 7-5 again, but my offense is really good, then maybe I could be the next head coach at USC. And if you have the opportunity to be a head coach at a blue blood program like that, you're almost silly to pass it up. So, yeah, that could be a factor. Graham Harrell potentially a de facto coach in waiting, right? USC is not naming him that or anything like that. But if his offense continues to produce like it did this year, but USC continues to struggle as a team like they did this year, then, yeah, maybe Graham Harrell is the next coach at Southern Cal, and maybe that is something that went into his decision to remain in Los Angeles. Good question. All right, if it's true Herman doesn't want to give full reign to the OC, then Herman better be ready to lose his job if it's not fixed in 2020. 100%. These hires by Tom Herman will dictate whether or not he's the long-term coach at Texas. And if it's true that Herman got cold feet on bringing in a guy like Graham Harrell, and Herman wants to stick to his offensive philosophy, and it doesn't work, right? The results aren't there like they weren't in the second half of this season, then yeah, Tom Herman's not going to be the long-term answer at head coach for Texas. Major Applewhite, is Major coming back? I don't think so. I feel like I'm hearing Major's name more from fans than I am from insiders And my folks behind the scenes, maybe he's still in the mix, but I don't think Major Applewhite's going to be the offensive coordinator here for next year. You don't look like a homeless person anymore. Thank you, CB. Yes, shaved, cleaned up, shower felt great. God, brushing your teeth after not brushing your teeth for a couple of days feels great. Greyhound buses are not great, man. Oh my God, that was a rough weekend. CB says, I thought Herman said he wanted to be a CEO coach again. Yeah, that's another interesting twist to this story, because last week at the Alamo Bowl press conferences down in San Antonio, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, Tom Herman was asked about the coordinator searches and talked about being willing to cede control of his offense to whatever offensive coordinator he brought in. And he also mentioned maybe going back to being more of a CEO type of coach and not calling the plays on either offense or defense. Tom Herman talked about that last week. He kind of brought that up himself in his press conference down in San Antonio, and then not even a week later, he has reportedly changed his mind. Once again, I don't know for sure. I'm going to do some digging tonight, and hopefully more stuff comes out on whether or not this was Tom Herman's decision or Graham Harrell's decision for him to ultimately sign that extension at USC. But yeah, an interesting 180 from Herman over the last couple of days, going from, yeah, I'm cool giving up the keys to this offense, I'm cool with being a CEO, to apparently not wanting to do that. Which is interesting. Drew Brees getting the record tonight. What, touchdown pass record? Is he, I don't know, before I started this video, it was 3-0 Saints. Although Tom Brady is like right there. So those guys are going to be trading first and second place for most touchdown passes all time in the NFL for as long as they are in the league, which, who knows, could be a couple of years for those two cats. All right, let's see. Brandon says, if Herman were to get fired, who would be your top head coaching candidates? Oh, do I have to? I don't want to do that. Brandon. I'm sorry, man. It's nothing personal. I haven't thought about it. I haven't wanted to think about that just yet. Top head coaching candidate to replace Tom Herman if it doesn't work out. Look, that changes every year. That changes every single year. So, not a question Texas fans have to worry about right now. You know, midway through the 2020 season, if this team is really struggling, if they're right around 500, then that's a question that we can answer and really focus on. But that's a never-ending cycle of who the top candidates out there are to be head coach. But and don't give up on Tom Herman just yet. All right, guys, keep the questions coming. We'll go to defensive coordinator for a little bit. This has been kind of a long video, but I want to make sure I answer some of y'all's questions and give some thoughts about the actual hire. I don't know if we can call it an actual hire because UT hasn't made it official yet, but multiple sources reporting over the weekend that Tom Herman has landed on Chris Ash to be the next defensive coordinator at the University of Texas. That's long been speculated. That has long been speculated. You know, there were reports that Tom Herman interviewed a couple of other external candidates for the DC job, but really since day one, there's been some scuttle that, Chris Ash was going to be the guy. You know, he was brought in as an analyst midway through last season, came in before the Oklahoma game, and was a part of this coaching staff the rest of the way for the rest of the season. Oklahoma was the third conference game last year, and Chris Ash was there from then on out. Now, hey, the defense got a little bit better over the last month of the season, but I don't know how much of an impact Chris Ash made on this defense. I don't know how much of an impact he was allowed to make on this defense. I don't know how much input he could have into the game plans. I mean, it's Todd Orlando's defense, and Chris Ash can say whatever he wants. He can give whatever input, whatever feedback he wants, but Todd Orlando doesn't have to listen to any of it. Ultimately, it is his defense. So I don't know how much of what we saw from UT in 2019 can be positively or negatively attributed to Chris Ash. A couple of things. There's pros and cons about Chris Ash, about the reported hire that Texas has made. One of the pros is his defense should be much less complex. Right? That was a big knock on Todd Orlando. We talked about it a lot on this channel, on the Horn. It felt like there was a different base defense every week for Texas. There was so much changing, there was so much disguising of blitzes and coverages that I don't know what the identity of this Texas Longhorn defense was in 2019, and you don't need to disguise that much to be successful. You just have to pick a base defense and be really good at it. Look at Baylor, look at Iowa State, the two top defenses in this conference this year. Everybody knew what they were trying to run, what they were trying to do, but they were so good at it that it worked. Todd Orlando, this defensive scheme or schemes that were run last year is asking guys to do all sorts of different things, right? Look at Joseph Osai. I think he's the best example. I mean, over the course of the same games, you would see Joseph Osai lined up as a defensive lineman. You would see him lined up as a B-backer, a middle linebacker. You would see him 25 yards down the field covering a wide receiver. Like, that should not be the case. It almost felt like this Texas defense was positionless at times in 2019. Kind of like the NBA is now, where you got 6'10 guys playing point guard. Like, it almost felt like Todd Orlando's defense was a little bit positionless, and guys were just being asked to do so many different things that, you know, they weren't a jack of all trades. Like, I guess they were a jack of all trades, but a master of none. I think Tom Herman actually used that. Like, they were asked to do so many different things, and yeah, they were okay at certain things, but they never really mastered what their job was supposed to be. Chris Ash's defense, much less complex. It's the base defense. It's 4 down, press quarters coverage, likely a 4-2-5 type of look, and it's designed to keep things in front of you. It's a read and react type of defense, very similar to what Gary Patterson runs at TCU, and that's a defense that has given Texas fits over the years. But I think the scheme is good for the personnel that Texas has. Now, Chris Ash, most of his experience as a defensive coordinator came in the Big Ten, different type of offense that most teams run up there. Chris Ash doesn't have a whole lot of experience as a DC against the Big 12 and against offenses, air raid offenses, against spread offenses. He hasn't dealt with that much in the past as a defensive play caller, so that'll be an interesting thing to see. Another thing I like about Chris Ash, though, he is a former defensive back. Played college football at Drake. Played some safety, some cornerback in college, and he coached D-backs for years, nearly a decade, before landing his first defensive coordinator job at Wisconsin in 2011. So that's a guy who has experience playing and coaching the defensive backfield, and I think that's a good thing for Texas because there's so much talent in the secondary. They're losing Brandon Jones, but just about everybody else at both corner and safety will be back for the Longhorns in 2020. There's a lot of talent, and I think if these guys are properly coached, they can be really, really good. Try to get Texas back to being DBU, which clearly has not been the case the last couple of years. But I think Chris Ash could really help the defensive backfield live up to potential. And I've seen a lot of Texas fans nervous by the fact that Chris Ash was the co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State when they won the championship in 2014. Like, a lot of folks are saying, well, that's why Chris Ash is a great hire because of that title. But then on the other end, well, he was the co-DC with Luke Fickell, who is now the head coach at Cincinnati, doing some great things with the Bearcats. I think important to note that Chris Ash was the play caller for those defenses, including that national championship winning defense at Ohio State. So he deserves some credit for that as well. Less complex defense, pretty good recruiter, I think. Now, he did not recruit well at Rutgers. That's a tough place to recruit. And I don't know how much credit you give Chris Ash for recruiting at Ohio State because, well, it seems like everybody can recruit to Ohio State, and Urban Meyer was the head coach. You know, it's an easy guy to want to play for. But Todd Orlando is not known as a good recruiter, so I think you're automatically getting a little bit of an upgrade on that front. And what else do we have for pros? Yeah, some familiarity that Chris Ash might have got from seeing these Big 12 teams this year, once again starting in the Oklahoma game. So he got to see every Big 12 offense except for Oklahoma State and West Virginia. So maybe that helped Chris Ash gain some familiarity with how some things work. But you know, the biggest the biggest question is obviously that Chris Ash is a comfort hire. Now, how much vetting of other candidates was really done by Tom Herman? Did he even interview these guys? Did he even consider these guys? You know, there were reports from insider sites saying that Tom Herman was told thanks but no thanks by a couple of folks for the defensive coordinator job. I don't know what's true. I don't know if there was really an extensive search for this defensive coordinator job or if Tom Herman always had his mind set on Chris Ash being the guy to run this defense. And that makes me a bit nervous, man. I mean, it's, you know, comfort hires aren't necessarily bad. I made this metaphor on the show today. Like, if you've got two equally talented guys and you're a boss and you're making a hiring decision and one of the candidates has similar philosophies, similar goals, similar beliefs that you do, and you know that guy pretty well, you're going to hire that guy. That guy's going to get the job over the other candidate who you've never worked with, you don't know anything about. But that only applies if they're equal candidates. I'm not sure Chris Ash was the biggest name out there that Texas could have gotten. So that's, I wish there was more of an extensive search. I wish there was more vetting going on there. And the comfort hire makes me a little bit nervous because, well, that's how Tom Herman filled his coaching staff when he got the job at Texas, right? He brought in, the majority of the coaching staff that he brought in were guys that he worked with at Houston, had worked with in previous jobs, and or guys that he was friends with. And those are the guys he just fired a couple of weeks ago. Like, that didn't work at UT. So that makes me a little bit nervous. I feel like this program needs some external voice, some external opinion, instead of just going with the guys who were here. I don't know if you can call Chris Ash an internal hire, technically, because he wasn't really on the staff last year, but it's an internal-ish hire, and that scares me a little bit. All right, back to the chat. I don't know why I forgot that word for a second. I'm getting all sort of updates about this Saints-Colts game. What's the score? Breeze tied the record, apparently. New Orleans kicked a field goal, record not broken yet. Oh, the touchdown was called back. Offensive pass interference on the Saints, so Breeze did not break the record. I'll get to catch that in the second half. I am not on the crapper, Michael. Appreciate you asking. I'm just on a chair in my bathroom, but I understand why you would think that is the case. All right, guys, I'm trying to think what else. I'll do, I always say this, I'll try to do a couple more videos this week. I'm kind of speaking gibberish right now. I can just feel it. Just a long weekend. I got to catch up on some sleep. I'll have some more thoughts on the offensive and defensive coordinator searches. Once again, it feels like the defensive coordinator search is over. It feels like Chris Ash is the guy. Curious if we'll get an official statement from the university before Wednesday, which is the start of the early signing period, National Signing Day 1. The de facto National Signing Day 1 is 2 days from now. My guess is we won't get anything official from UT until after that, but everybody already knows what's happening, and we'll see. But offensive coordinator, once again, if you're just joining us, it feels like Chip Long. That's the guy I would put money on right now. Not a lot of money on it. Like, I would have told you to put more money on Graham Harrell last week to be the offensive coordinator at Texas. But just in terms of philosophy, in terms of the fact that Chip Long just got fired at his job a couple of days ago at Notre Dame, that seems to me to be the most ideal fit for Texas. After that, I gave y'all a couple of names. Man, it sort of feels like a crapshoot on who it's going to be. There's a part of me that thinks maybe Tom Herman's just going to go Bill O'Brien and say, yeah, to hell with it. I'm going to do this. This is my team. He's going to go Charlie Strong year 3 and just take over the defense. Tom Herman might just take over the offense. I can't imagine that happens, but with all of the names that keep falling out of the offensive coordinator search for Texas, I don't know what's going to happen if it's not Chip Long. So there's the news, guys. Keep in mind that Ash's defense did practice against Ohio State's spread offense when he was the defensive coordinator there. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point there, Vince. Appreciate the comment there, sir. I think Chris Ash can be a good defensive coordinator. I mean, he's got some skins on the wall, had good results at Wisconsin, good results at Ohio State. Now, some Wisconsin fans will swear that their defense got better once Ash left and once Dave Aranda came in. But statistically, Wisconsin's defenses were pretty damn good under Chris Ash, and obviously Ohio State's defenses were pretty good too, and they got better every year that Chris Ash was the defensive coordinator too. So kind of easy to be an assistant coach at Ohio State, especially under Urban Meyer. At least it felt that way. But I think Chris Ash earned his stripes there, and he got the opportunity at Rutgers that didn't work. I mean, he was terrible. All the Rutgers jokes started because of Chris Ash, man. I mean, the guy before him was Kyle Flood. Kyle Flood was 23-22 as a head coach at Rutgers. He got fired because of some NCAA violations and some players getting in trouble. He was 27-24, excuse me. Chris Ash was 8-32. Like, the most notable thing that Chris Ash did as a head coach at Rutgers was lose out on Jonathan Taylor, who at one point was committed to Rutgers, the guy who's from New Jersey, and I don't know what happened. I tried to look up the details last night, but JT flipped his commitment to Wisconsin, and he's won the Doak Walker Award 2 years in a row. That's like the most notable thing Chris Ash did as a head coach. So it's a good thing Texas isn't bringing him in as the head coach. I don't know how much you can judge the Ash hire as a defensive coordinator based on his 3 years as the head coach at Rutgers. And it's pretty funny because Texas has had so many different coordinators over the years. Chris Ash had 3 offensive coordinators in his 3+ years of being the head coach at Rutgers. So he's used to all sorts of coordinator changes, apparently. But yeah, and Kyle Flood, 27 and 24. Greg Schiano was 68 and 67 as a head coach. Chris Ash, just the whole Rutgers program completely fell apart under him. But once again, I don't know, different job. I don't know how much you can judge him for that. Texas basketball, 9-1. Yes, sir. Best start for Shaka Smart. And jury's still out for the Longhorn basketball team, no doubt about that. But, man, it's been such a crazy year in college hoops. There's so much parity in the sport. The playing field is so level. You got to give Texas some credit for being 9-1. They've had some close calls. Barely beat McNeese State. We're down at halftime to Central Michigan. But, man, it's just – I was watching Texas Tech Southern Miss tonight. Like, Southern Miss gave Texas Tech all they could handle. A 3-6 Southern Miss team gave Texas Tech a lot. It's a close game into the final minutes in Lubbock. It's just that kind of year in college basketball. So any win you will take if you are Texas. The Longhorns, not ranked in the new AP Top 25. They did receive some votes, I think 10 of them. They're technically ranked like 35, 36, somewhere like that if you count the others receiving votes category. Big one this weekend, though, coming up against Providence. That's the toughest non-con game that the Longhorns have left. It was a weak non-conference slate. I don't know if Texas is going to be ranked at all going into conference play, but they've got a chance to get 2 more wins in the non-con to get to 11-1 before Baylor. At Baylor. Baylor's number 10 in the country. That's the first Big 12 game of the year for Texas right after the turn of the new year. So we'll learn pretty quick once conference play starts what this Texas team is really made of. When's the last time Texas actually got a coach that they wanted? If we're talking football, well, they sent a whole excursion, sent a whole airplane and private jet to go get Sterling Gilbert and Matt Maddox from Tulsa. Does that count as getting a guy that they wanted? I mean, Tom Herman would be the obvious answer if we're talking about a head coach. That's the guy that Texas wanted as soon as they made the Charlie Strong move, and they were able to steal him away from LSU. Maybe a blessing in disguise for LSU, as it turns out. But Tom Herman is the answer for when the last time Texas got a coach that they wanted. If we're talking assistant coach, then that's interesting. That's an interesting one. I'd have to think about that for a little bit. All right, guys. Michael says neither side of the ball needs major overhauling for Texas football. Defense needs a major overhaul. Defense needed a major overhaul. They just did. I mean, they were horrible last year. Fundamentally bad, schematically bad. Guys weren't getting developed. The defense needs a major overhaul, and Chris Ash I think he can provide that for Texas. Offense, maybe not as much, but changes need to be made. There's no doubt. All right, guys, I'm done. Too long of a video. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the love. I appreciate the support as always. I probably should have separated these into a couple of different videos, but for those of you who tuned in for little or all of this video, many thanks. I will try to do a couple more of these this week, depending on what happens with the coordinator news surrounding the University of Texas. But remember that name, Chip Long, just fired at Notre Dame a couple of days ago. If I had to pick a favorite to be the next offensive coordinator at Texas, he would be the guy now that Graham Harrell is out of the equation. All right, thanks as always for the love. Appreciate the support. And listen to the show. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'm done. I'm talking too much. It's word salad right now. Y'all have a good night. Appreciate it. Hook 'em.